Right. Good evening. Today's share should be for the Refuah Shalema of Rafal Batzal Mordechai ben Chan Rezel, Michael Shlomo ben Michal, Yitzchak Isaac ben Michal, Shlomo ben Elisheva, Yochanan ben Esther, Yosef ben Yael, and Zahava bat Saranecha. And also our share should be Le'elui Nishmat, Gershon ben Arieleb, Ephraim ben David, Yosef ben Moshe, Malka Bela bat Shoshan Chava, and tonight is the yahrzeit of Elka bat Raphael. And also, very significantly, this year should be, the merit of this year should be for the safe release of Yaakov Naftali ben Rachel Devora, Gilad Michael ben Bat Galim, and Eyal ben Iris Tesura. Should all be released. These are the three captives who were, the three yeshiva bochurim who were kidnapped in Eretz Yisrael. I can't begin to imagine what their parents and family must be going through with this terrible situation here. So there's Tehillim all over the UK, I'm sure in America and all over the world there's Tehillim. Hashem should answer all our prayers and give us a favourable ending. The kids should go back safely and soundly to their families. Okay, so this week's parasha is Parashat Korach, and there are 3 shiurim which, as of now, should be on TorahAnytime.com. Last year's shiur was called Rebel Without a Clue. The shiur from the year before that was Champion of a Lost Cause, and from the year before that there was a shiur called Rebel. Korach is Revolting. That's another subtitle. So again, that was back in the day when I was a little bit more adventurous. I'm a bit more boring now. I want to start off today with a story. Now I like to always, if I can, build in things that I see, experiences I have, with and give it like a meaning, to show that Hashem doesn't put us in these situations just randomly. So today was a day that I was dreading. When somebody has something they don't look forward to, they think about it, they're sort of counting down the days and the hours and they can't wait till it's over. And I'm not talking about this year, I'm talking about going to the dentist. Now, most people, I would say they're parv with the dentist. They don't like it, they don't not like it. I've got a particular childhood fear of dentists. So I remember when I was a kid, when you go to the dentist, it's just a formality. You go in, he puts you on the chair, he raises you up, he puts you down, it's fine, you have a nice ride. It's the same as going to Thorpe Park or something, one of these, brilliant. I remember going in one year, and it wasn't just going up and down in the chair, he checked my mouth and he found something, he did this and that. And ever since then I felt a sense of betrayal. There was this, this happy-go-lucky, they didn't have Uncle Moshe in those days, but my dentist was very, he was a frum guy. And with that sense of betrayal started coming a sense of fear. And then, when you go in, you always start worrying, and your tongue always runs over your teeth, see if there's any cavities there. And teeth are naturally not flat, they're indented anyway, so when you're a kid, you're really paranoid. And your feeling is that, oh my gosh, every single tooth of mine has got a cavity in it. I have to go and have fillings and it's going to hurt. And he's going to be looking down and I'll be able to see up his nose and he'll be singing classical music like my dentist used to do. Then I grew up and the fear started going and then it started coming back again. It was a whole big thing. So I hadn't been for my regular checkups for a while, and my wife took the liberty of making an appointment for herself and myself as well. And I made no bones that I was not looking forward to it. And I was a little on the worried side, put it that way. And as the time was going on, and you go into the waiting room and you're waiting, and I started getting the butterflies, and the whole thing was building up and up and up and up. And my wife said to me, even if you get a filling and you have the injection and they're drilling in your mouth, you should just remove yourself from the situation. Just imagine you're lying on a beach and the wind is blowing on your face and it's warm. And she made this scene, and it was a very nice scene. But at the end of the day, I said, it's hard to imagine yourself on your beach when somebody's got a pneumatic drill in your mouth. So that didn't really do me any good. Anyway, by the time I got in the chair, I was plutzing, and my wife decided to come in with me. Now, I didn't feel too comfortable with that, but she, being a wife, she wanted, So the first thing she said to the dentist was, please go easy with him, because it was a big job of getting him here in the first place. And that was a little embarrassing on my part, because I felt like a little kid. Having said that, my 8-year-old son, my 7-year-old son, I should say, he's not 8 yet, he's almost 8, went in and had a filling last week, and he was as brave as anything. So here's his daddy, not exactly the same sense of, same state of mind. But so as soon as I opened my mouth, I knew that's it. They're going to find everything wrong. They're going to look, probe, and find this root canal and all that crazy thoughts going through my head. So she's looking through and she's saying, oh, you have to have a filling there, but otherwise, no, your teeth look really good, actually. Well done, very nice. And then she took some x-rays, and dentist looked at the x-rays, and the dentist said, oh, in fact, the filling that you had to have, it's not urgent. Actually, no, I'm not going to do it today. Don't worry, come back in 6 months' time. And I went out free as a bird. And I thought to myself, all of that worrying, all that misdirected panic and all this nonsense for nothing. Where did it get me? A grown man sitting in a chair, plutzing and worrying, and it got me absolutely nowhere, except it was highly amusing for my wife. So at least somebody benefited from that. But you're probably wondering, why am I saying this? Well, when I left that dentist surgery, I felt, in English you would say, I felt like a right Burke. I felt really foolish, because I'd built up this paranoia, and I built up this whole scenario of something that, if I would have really sat and rationalized it, it was wasted energy. And this, I feel, was in fact what Korach was going through, because Korach built up a whole inflated self-image of himself that was so divorced from the truth. It was so unnecessary, and in fact he did himself a tremendous disservice, because he could have been fulfilling a position that nobody could have had in the world ever, and that was being the one and only Levi HaGadol. We know what a Kohen Gadol is. We've never heard of a Levi Gadol, because the position doesn't exist. At least it doesn't exist since Korach mucked up, because he would have had that position. And since he couldn't fulfill that position, nobody had that position. It went to waste. And that was the tragedy. Because for somebody to realize that through his actions he's actually thrown away something which is so important, and he spun himself this web of lies, and now the rug gets pulled away from his feet. Imagine how disastrous that is. It's much worse than coming away from the dentist feeling like a Burke. But anyway, and what's even worse than that for Korach, through Korach's actions, through his trying to topple Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen from their lofty positions, he actually became an apikoros. He actually became an unbeliever, from somebody who was, up until that point, he was a tzaddik. He fell so low, he became an apikoros. How could he have gone to such a low level? How did he find such an ignoble ending as being swallowed by the earth and being discredited completely and having no share in Olam Haba, as the Gemara in Sanhedrin says? How come? He heard Hashem's voice at Har Sinai just like the next man. What forced him to do what he did? And I'm just going to talk about one answer. There are many answers to this question. There's one answer, and I'll tell you with a very brief mashal, a parable. So, there was once a wannabe archer, somebody who had a bow and arrow, and he would go into the forest and fire his arrows here and there, and he'd never hit the target. He'd be wildly off. People would be scared to go into the forest with him in case he'd shoot out one way and the arrow would come back and hit the other person. So he went by himself. He wanted to hit this tree, and he hit a tree like 5 trees away. So he was fed up. He just couldn't hit anything that he wanted. And then he struck upon a plan. He decided to change things slightly. He decided to shoot the arrow. Wherever the arrow hit, he would run up to that tree and he would draw a little target around where the arrow had hit. And then he would invite his friends to the forest and say, hey, look, you see, I'm a much better archer than you think. Look, bullseye. Then they said to him, okay, very good, that's amazing. Let's see you do it again. He said, okay. So he would shoot the arrow again and then run up and paint the same target. They said to him, you fool. That's not how you do it. First you have the target and then you shoot the arrow at the target, and that's how you get your practice. That's how you become an expert archer. But this was Korach's mistake. He was so intent. He had one plan. It was my way or the highway. He was so convinced, he sold himself his own lie, and he believed it so intently that he was prepared to sell Moshe Rabbeinu and sell Aaron HaTzadik, float them down the river. And who would have done such a thing? To come and try and displace Moshe Rabbeinu, the likes of whom was never seen and will never be, who talked to Hashem peh al peh, who was the Navi, the prophet, par excellence. How could he imagine doing? Didn't he see Yetzias Mitzrayim? Didn't he see the splitting of the Yam Suf? Didn't he see all the plagues and how Moshe Rabbeinu had an active part and Aaron had an active part? This was just chance. But he was so intent that he drew that target round the arrow, and he said, I'm going to knock them off their pedestal, and then everything will be fine and dandy. That's not how things work. Because by doing this, he did something which was worse than terrible. It was worse than tragic. I can't even think of the strong enough words. He impinged on the honor of God because he tampered with God's servants. If you tamper with God's servants, you tamper with God. That's it. That's how far he went. Now, why did Moshe Rabbeinu have such a strong reaction? Because it says Moshe Rabbeinu went all out against Korach and his 250 followers, and also Datan v'Aviram. Initially, it was Korach and the 250 men. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu so intent on Hashem not listening to their prayers? Normally, Moshe Rabbeinu, what did he do with the Meraglim? What did he do with any other of the challenges he had? He would always pray, and he would always try and make peace, whatever he would do. But here he said, no, Hashem, don't listen to their prayers. Why? A simple answer. The honor of God is not negotiable. Here, God's name was being besmirched. That is not something you want to tamper with. That's why it is so terrible, beyond any shadow of a doubt, to come up in this day and age and turn around and say there is no God. Because there's no greater besmirchment of God's name than denying the existence of God and the omnipotence of God. That is the worst thing you can do. That is the sin of Korach, and it's happening in our day and age. When we look at the London buses with the signs all over them, announcing, heresy and apostasy and every other word you want to say, and God's name is being pushed further and further down into the mud. Rahman al-Aslan. It's beyond disastrous. So this sin is being perpetuated in our times. And it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening, because I don't even want to imagine what Hashem would do if Hashem took revenge. So let's see what happened. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do? We said he was going all out against Korach. It says the pasuk, Perek Tet Zayin, Perek 16, pasuk Daled, pasuk 4. It says the pasuk, Vayishma Moshe Vayipol al panav. Moshe Rabbeinu heard and he fell on his face. That's not like Moshe to give up. What stopped him? What happened to going up and pleading with Hashem and the 13 attributes of justice, attributes of Hashem, Shoshet Midot, and David and Hashem saying, Salachti kidvarecha? None of that happened. Just Moshe Rabbeinu fell on his face. You know what it says? What did he hear? It says, V'ishma Moshe. What did he hear that made him fall on his face? He heard something unbelievable. And when the words come out of my mouth, unless I saw it written down, I wouldn't believe it myself. Moshe Rabbeinu was being suspected of something himself. Can you believe? Well, now, it's not the first time Moshe Rabbeinu was under suspicion. When he was building the Mishkan, they suspected him of pocketing the money himself. And he had been under suspicion for things which, of course, were totally divorced from the truth, from reality. But, if somebody in their warped mind thought of that, okay, you know what? It's a terrible thing. You're probably projecting your own bad attributes on somebody else. But, okay, people have been accused of stealing before. But here they accuse Moshe Rabbeinu of doing something unbelievable. They accuse Moshe Rabbeinu of committing immorality with other people's wives. Now, just to say it is just ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Moshe Rabbeinu being accused of such a thing. They said he was secluding himself in the tent. How ridiculous. So, I wouldn't say normal, I'd say any person who would be on an ordinary level would be excused if they got up and started shouting, screaming and saying, how dare you accuse me of this? This is absolutely untrue. There's no shadow of a doubt that this is lies. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even open his mouth. What does it say about Moshe Rabbeinu? He got up, took his tent and pitched his tent outside the camp. He just saw the machloket, he saw the argument, he saw the accusation. He didn't even bother answering them. He just walked away from it. And that is what Korach should have done. He saw an argument, he smelt the air of dissension. He should have just got up and walked away. Like On ben Pelet, who was also partying. There was somebody called On, who was, again, part of this whole thing. He was part of this group of disparate, bandits. I shouldn't really say bandits, because these 250 people who were with Korach, there were 250 of the holiest people. But there were a couple of bandits apart from those 250, like Datan and Aviram, no gooders. So On ben Pelet was part of this argument. He needed to identify with something. His life was fairly meaningless, or at least in his own eyes, it was meaningless. No Jew is meaningless. Nobody in the desert was meaningless. He felt his life had no purpose. So he wanted to attach himself to something. That's why I have so many people joining different groups, different political parties, because they feel their lives are so empty, they need to give their lives meaning. So he needs to give his life a meaning. So he joined this band of people who were rebelling. And his wife got him out of the problem. And he never went. He never appeared at the showdown between the 250 people and Korach and Moshe Rabbeinu. He wasn't there because his wife saved him. We talked about this in previous shiurim. And that's exactly what Korach should have done. He should have just left it. As soon as he felt that vibe, the bad vibe, he should have said, this is not where I want to be. Now who knows, in perfect hindsight, where he could have been. Who knows, I don't know. But there's definitely a lesson to be learned there, an important lesson. And here's a story that happened maybe, I would say not even 100 years ago. Probably I would say about maybe 70 years ago. With the Ponevezher Rav Kahaneman was the founder of the yeshiva in Ponevezh in Eretz Yisrael, and he collected money anywhere and everywhere. He would go anywhere for the smallest amount of money, he would go. And this story involves when he came to London, here to these very shores, and he was collecting, and he himself was a very mild-mannered person. And he met with somebody in London who he was expecting this person to give him a nice donation. This person ended up not only not giving him, he ended up lambasting him and shouting at him and insulting him. And the poor Ponevezher Rav is listening to these insults. And of course the Ponevezher Rav never answered back. He just got up and he walked out. Meanwhile, the Rabbonim in London heard about it, about the incident, and they were appalled. How dare this person speak with such chutzpah, with such venom to the Ponevezher Rav? So they found this fellow and they wanted to put him in Cherem. They wanted to excommunicate him. The Ponevezher Rav heard about it and he said, do not do that. Don't put him in Cherem on my account. And they said, why? He insulted you. There's no question he deserves to be excommunicated. The Ponevezher Rav said, no. Because my Rebbe, the Chofetz Chaim, gave me a bracha and said to me, whatever you do in your life, you will be successful. You have bracha with you, which is an amazing thing. If you hear the Chofetz Chaim saying that to you, that empowers you. You know you can go and build yeshivas, you know you can turn the world around. So he said, I give you the bracha, anything you do, you will be matzliach, except in one thing. If you enter into an argument, you will never be matzliach. So the Ponevezher Rav said, this is a vikuach, this is an argument, it's a machloket. So I don't want any part of it. I just want to walk away. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu, I want to get up and turn the other way and just leave. And that's exactly what he did. And the Cherem never happened. So this is reinforcing the point that machloket is not something to be faced, it's something to be, well, you have to flee. You have to pick up your feet and run. What happened to Korach in the end? The earth opened up. It says, Pi haaretz, the mouth of the earth, swallowed him and anything and everything and anything to do with him. His family, his belongings. They say even a needle, says the Midrash, even a needle that he lent to somebody else, left the other person's house and went, as if by magic, was flying along the ground and went into the hole. Everything. Lock, stock, and barrel. But included in that tally of people were young children. Innocent, seemingly innocent young children. The family of Korach. Now, why would Hashem take the lives of children? Children of 2 years old, babies. 5 years old, 7 years old. What possible averas could these children have done? It's a very unusual thing. So I heard one explanation, and it involves the Ben Sorer or Moreh. What is the Ben, or who is the Ben Sorer or Moreh? The Ben Sorer or Moreh is the undisciplined child, the rebellious son. The son which we talk about, who rebels against his parents, he steals from his parents, he eats meat, he drinks wine, he gets involved in all sorts of bad behavior. And at the tender age of, I think it's 12 or 13, if all the conditions are met, which are very, very strict conditions, so in fact they say it never actually happened, that if all these conditions were met, then this child will be taken to Beis Din and executed. How come? The answer is, we execute him because he's in a bad way. He's going letarbut ra'ah, he's going towards he's going off the derech. If he gets past his bar mitzvah and he becomes into man, he's carrying on like this, he's just going to gather all the averos you can think of, and there'll be no hope for him. Now, of course, everyone is open to teshuvah, but teshuvah will be elusive for this person. It will be very difficult for him. So what do we say? Of course, there, as I said, there are many, many conditions attached to this. It's not simple. We won't just slap him up and sentence him. Once these rigorous conditions have been met, only then and only then, and witnesses and the whole thing, then he can be executed. But unless that's the case, then he's not. But the reason we execute him is because we do not want him to continue in this downward slide. Because the way he is now, there's basically no hope for the guy. This is why the children of Korach were taken down into that pit with him. Because they didn't stand a chance. Growing up with Korach, if that's how they were going to be, they're from this family, they were a chip off the old block, as we say, they didn't stand a chance. Just like the Ben Soror Moreh is executed before he can do any worse, so too with the children. Now, of course, the children were not judged by a Beis Din like the Ben Soror Moreh. The children were judged by Hashem himself. So therefore, Hashem being the true judge, Hashem knew exactly who had to be taken into the hole and who not. Now, here's one of my own thoughts. Korach was very stubborn. We already said he wouldn't be moved. He was being egged on by his wife, who felt that her husband got a bad deal, and that her husband got the raw end of the stick, raw end of the deal. And Korach himself was totally unperturbed. Now, there's a phrase that we have in the English language of somebody who, in fact, there's two phrases, of a person who will not be moved. He will not, whatever argument you present to the fellow, he will have an answer for you. He will not be moved. It's called standing your ground. And the other phrase is digging your heels in, or digging your feet in. Now, what happens when a person stands his ground? He's not going to be moved. He's standing there and nothing can topple him over. So my thought was, it was very appropriate for a person who said his feet are on the ground, he's digging his heels into the ground, that the very ground which he put his own trust in and would not move from gave way beneath him. And he was swallowed up in that very ground. So a person in this life has to examine what he's doing and his life's direction, where he's going. Is he doing what he's doing for the sake of heaven, or is it for the sake of himself? It's not always easy to discern between the two. A person has to have deep self-examination. Am I being propelled by Hashem, or am I listening to the Yetzer Hara? Very often a person can do what he thinks is a tremendous mitzvah. And who is propelling him to this tremendous mitzvah? I say mitzvah very loosely and in inverted commas. Who's propelling him? None other than the Yetzer Hara. I'm sorry to give the same example again, but it's just come to my mind. The same story, I always talk about this. The guy in shul who sees somebody else talking in shul. Now, of course, it's wrong to talk in shul, but it's even worse when you say to the fellow and you shout at him in front of everybody and say, "How dare you talk in shul, stop talking!" And everyone turns around and, now, of course, like I said, it's wrong to talk in shul, But what's much, much, much worse than that is embarrassing in public. Because talking in shul, you're right, it's one of the worst sins. It says in the Shulchan Aruch, Gadol ha'avon minusor, that your sin is too great to bear. But also at the same time, hamavayesh chavero barabim ein lo chelek l'olam haba. Somebody who embarrasses his friend in public, and in public doesn't mean a huge auditorium, it means 3 or more people. And 3 more people is not many people. Most shuls have at least 10 people in them. So you embarrass your friend in public, you could be as great as the Chofetz Chaim, you could be another Rambam, you could be another Pnei Yeshua. You ain't going to get anything in Olam Haba. Nothing. Unless you go through, first of all, rigorous teshuvah, and you've got to be Matthias him, and the whole thing, and your own life will be a kapar for you in the end. After you have teshuvah and Yom Kippur, and it's not even worth thinking about. So don't do it. Don't do it. You think you're doing a mitzvah, but you're doing the worst aveira. So don't do it. It's just not worth it. Because that's what happens when a person digs his feet in and he stands his ground. A person in this life has to always examine what he does, and a person has to be open-minded. I'm not talking about the Torah. The Torah demands us. We have 630 mitzvahs. That's not negotiable. But there's times when we have to be flexible. We can't be immovable. We have to ask a Rav, and a Rav may say something that we may not necessarily like, and we might think it's wrong. But you went and you asked the Rav or the Posek or whoever reliable authority you've asked, and now you have to listen. You have to listen. That's it. There's no 2 ways about it. There's no, I don't like what he's saying, I'll go to another Rav, or I'll make my own decision. I've taken his advice and I don't like his advice. It doesn't work like that. A person has to be flexible in many situations. Right. Another thought that I had. Why was it called Pi Haaretz, the mouth of the earth? Why not the hole in the earth? Hachor ba'aretz, habor ba'aretz. Well, why Pi? What in your mouth? So I want to suggest that the whole sin of Korach was done with his mouth. So again, midah k'neged midah, measure for measure. His punishment was that the mouth that he used, now you're having a mouth, is going to swallow you up. You see the damage that can be caused by the mouth. And another thing, what happens when after 120 years, Rahman al a person dies? We bury them in the ground. The ground is supposed to be a menucha. It's supposed to be a comfort for the person. Okay, a person has his final resting place, and then of course, we don't want to go into the gory details, but they say a person gets returned to his resting place. So if the ground is supposed to give a person menucha, look what it did to Korach. The ground that's supposed to be your final resting place turns out to be your worst Gehinnom. Because look what happened to him when he was swallowed in the earth. It didn't just close up and he was buried there. He went into a living Gehinnom. He saw no end. He was screaming, Moshe Emet v'Torato Emet. So the ground which normally gives menucha for a person did exactly the opposite for Korach. And quoting another pasuk in the same perek, we go forward to pasuk Tet Vav. It's again we're in perek 16, pasuk 15. Vayechar leMoshe ma'od. Vayomer el Adonai al teifen el minchatam lo chamor echad mehem nasati v'lo harayoti et achad mehem. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Hashem in no uncertain terms, don't listen to the prayers of these people. Moshe, again, it's so unusual. Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Hashem, don't accept their prayers. And who was praying? You have to understand who was praying. We're talking about people praying for the worst thing. They were praying against Moshe Rabbeinu. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu should have said, look, Hashem, they're praying against me, that means they're praying against you. So of course their prayers are not going to be accepted. Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of something. What was he afraid of? There's a very simple answer to this question. Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of the prayers because he knows that when a person prays to Hashem, then those prayers are going to be accepted. It doesn't matter who's doing the praying. It doesn't matter what their motivations are. If a person turns his heart to Hashem in sincerity, that's something to be afraid of. So Moshe Rabbeinu was worried that Hashem would accept their prayers. Can you imagine that? Hashem accepts the prayers of Rishonim, of people who are no-gooders, one of the worst things, were rebelling against Moshe Rabbeinu, rebelling against the Torah, and ultimately rebelling against Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu was worried that those prayers would be accepted. Now that is a frightening lesson. Because if Hashem can accept the sincere prayers of people who are evil, can you imagine how powerful are the prayers who are tzaddikim, who are praying to Hashem, release those 3 boys from their captors, who are praying to Hashem, let this heilige neshama, let this holy soul have a high, lofty place in Gan Eden. Like my friend's mother I just mentioned, Elka Bas Rafael. Let Hashem give a refuah shlema to these poor people who are languishing in the hospital, who don't know what's going to be with them, or who are waiting tests. You don't think Hashem's going to answer those tefillahs? You think Hashem only answers tefillahs of Rishonim? Hashem yearns for our prayers. If you could say such a thing about Hashem. You can't really say anything about Hashem. The Hashem, as it were, is chalishing. Like we chalish, we're desperate, we're always chomping at the bit when our children give us nachas. We love it so much when our children come home and their Shabbos daddy or their Shabbos imma, and they come home and they come and they say Torah Tziva Lo Moshe, or they come and sing Torah, 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 Torah. All these beautiful things, we love it so much. And it pains us when they get older and they stop being like that. When they get into teenagehood, and when they lose that cheshek a little bit. And we relish that, we want them to have that back. And we try so hard to keep it interesting, keep it going for them. We love nachas from our children. You think Hashem doesn't shlap nachas from us? You think what we do is not pleasing in the eyes of Hashem? Even when we do bad, God forbid, Hashem still loves us. He doesn't like the bad things that we do, but He loves us. He loves us more than we could ever possibly imagine. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid. He was afraid of those prayers, because Hashem loves a heart that turns to Him with a capital H, with sincerity. That's all it takes. Turn to Hashem with sincerity. You know how powerful your tefillahs are. And then towards the end of the parasha, we have this incident about the sticks. Each of the Shvatim had a stick. And they all gave their sticks, and then the stick of Aaron HaKohen sprouted almonds. We know this story. We've talked about this in previous shiurim. Why almonds? Of all the fruit, you pick an almond? You know why it says an almond was so appropriate to grow on the stick of Aaron HaKohen? Because an almond, when you taste an almond tastes bitter. It has a bitter taste. But you keep chewing it, and you keep chewing it, and it has an aftertaste. And the aftertaste is very sweet. That was the lesson we need to teach Korach. Because Korach, for him, everything was bitter. And he was so jealous. And he was consumed. And he couldn't take it. And he was being passed over. And somebody younger than him got his position. And he should have had it. And it should have been, wait, Korach, put aside the bitter. Because at the end, you could have had the sweetest thing. You could have been the Levi Godon. You could have been a contender. To borrow a famous quote, he didn't wait. He couldn't see beyond the bitter. Chaval al azman. Now what happens when all those staffs went in the middle and only Aaron's staff sprouted with the almonds? Each shevet took their stick back. Each head of the tribe took their stick back without none of them had any almonds on them. Why? Each tribe took their own stick that didn't have any almonds on it. In effect, they were losers. They took the stick and they hold it up proudly. You see, this is the one that didn't sprout. I am the one who was not as great as Aaron. Everyone was proud to be under Aaron, proud to be lower. Again, exactly diametrically opposite to Korach. Korach couldn't take being a loser. That was the worst thing for him. But every other shevet, not only did they not fight about being a loser, they were proud about being a loser. And you can see from this, says the Sefer Minha Be'er, that if you're a loser, you still have an identity. And you are still special. And you are still unique. Because we talk about this all the time. All the time. There is nobody in this world who can do your job, not even better than you. There's nobody who can do your job at all. If you don't do your job, nobody will do that job for you, because if you don't have a unique job, there's no point for you being here in this world. So if you think you're a nobody, you are denying why God sent you here in the first place. So if you're unique, you better find out what it is that you're here to do, and you better do it and do it well. It could take you a lifetime. And you might die trying, but it's your life's job to find out what that is, because there is nobody who can do that job other than you. And I'm going to finish with a story back in the mid-1800s in Lithuania. The story goes, there was a Rav, it was called the Amudei Eish, Rav Shmuel Avram, or Rav Avram Shmuel, I'm not sure. The Amudei Eish was a Rav in Lithuania. He was very famous, he was very well renowned and very well loved. He was an Ahuv. And he was a Rav of a certain shul. And as the rabbi's position would have it, the rabbi sits near to the Aron HaKodesh, right up in the front, next to where the Sifrei Torah are kept. And in Lithuania, the government there had other ideas who should be the rabbi, because they wanted a rabbi who they could speak to. They wanted a rabbi, like a head of the Jewish community, who would communicate with the secular government. So they appointed a rabbi, and he was not, put it this way, was not as great as the Amudei Eish, put it that way. That's putting it mildly. And this rabbi, I think his name was Rabbi Mitam. Rabbi Mitam had a seat, and his seat was next to the bimah. So the bimah was in the middle of the shul, and the Amudei Eish, the rabbi of the shul itself, sat right in the front, as we said, next to the Aron HaKodesh. So this Rabbi Mitam was very, put it this way, he wasn't too comfortable with where he was. Not just geographically, but also in terms, philosophically, let's say. So one Shabbat, he decided to come to shul early, and he decided to go and sit in the rabbi's seat, all the way up by the Aron HaKodesh. Now that's a great chutzpah for anyone to go and sit in the rabbi's seat. I would not advise it to anybody. Anyway, be that as it may, the Amudei Eish got to shul and he sees this Rabbi Mitam sitting in his seat. Now, of course, the Amudei Eish was very far from machloket. He would not want to pick a fight with anybody. He went and he sat somewhere else. Didn't even open his mouth. But the Kehillah there were probably appalled. But they didn't say anything. The Rav didn't say anything. They didn't say anything. And everything was carrying on until near to the time when they're having the Kriyat Torah, they have, as we have in the UK, they have a prayer for the welfare of the government. Here we have in many United synagogues, we have a prayer for the royal family, and also in some shuls they have a prayer for the Medinat Israel, whether you agree with that or not. There's such a thing exists, and you almost universally we have a prayer for the soldiers, which is very, very praiseworthy. We should pray for our brothers who are putting their lives on the line for us as a Jewish people. These people are on an unbelievable level. So it's up to us. The least we can do is pray for them, whether it's with the tzibur or whether it's by ourselves. We should pray for the welfare of our brothers who are fighting, whether it's in Israel or wherever. So in those days, they prayed for the government. Who was the government at that time? It was the Tsar Nikolai. So every week they would normally say a prayer for the welfare of the Tsar and the welfare of the government. That week, where Rabbi Mitam was sitting in the rabbi's seat, they forgot the prayer for the Tsar. Now what happened? One elderly gentleman got up, and this elderly gentleman happened to be, he used to be a soldier in the Tsar's army, and this fellow was incensed, and he ran straight up to Rabbi Mitam, who was sitting in the rabbi's seat right in the front of the shul. He said, "How dare you not say the prayer for the Tsar? I served in the Tsar's army for 20 years, and this is a terrible thing. How dare you?" And he was ranting and screaming and shouting. And the word got back to the Lithuanian government. And they summoned the rabbi, who was under fire. And who was that? Rabbi Mitam. He was sitting in the rabbi's seat after all. And they pulled him in. And they said to him, "Hey, what's going on? We heard you normally play for the Tsar. Well, why have you stopped that?" He said, "I'm really sorry. I would never have let it happen. But I was sitting far away from where they pray this prayer for the Tsar. I was right in the front of the synagogue next to where they keep our holy scrolls of the Torah. And I couldn't hear from way there in the front." So they said to him, "Well, you don't sit there anymore. You go back and you sit right next to where they say this prayer, and you make sure that they say it." And of course, that was where his normal seat was. And he had no chance now. He was now banished and ordered to sit in the same seat, and he can never go and sit in the rabbi's seat. So, okay, this is a amusing story, but what comes out of this story? A person is who he is, and he's got to be who he is. He can't be somebody else. You can't be a Korach and want to be a Moshe Rabbeinu. You've got to be a Korach and you've got to be a Levi HaGadol. You can't be a Kohen Gadol. You can't be a Manahig of Klal Yisrael. You've got to be who you are. Don't have designs on other people. Because nobody can do that job better than them, and nobody can do your job better than you. And on a deeper level, the fight between Moshe Rabbeinu and Korach was equivalent to the fight between Cain and Hevel. Because Cain and Hevel were reincarnated, says the Arizal, as Moshe Rabbeinu and Korach. And Korach had a chance because he was Cain, and he could have made up for his mistake because he had the world's first machloket and he killed his brother. Now he had the chance to make it up with his brother, and he failed again. You see how deep this argument goes? Machloket argument is just not worth it. You know, I'll tell you something which might be a little bit frightening, and I'm going to finish with this. That a person can be 100% correct in an argument. 100% correct. And there's no question that the other person is 100% wrong. It's clear cut. But yet, if through that machloket, the person who's 100% right causes pain, I'm not talking about on purpose, I'm not talking about b'kavanah, with intention, I'm talking about unintentional. If the person who is 100% correct causes unintentional pain to the person who's 100% wrong, then the person who's 100% right will have to pay for it. Now, you could turn around and say, where's the justice in that? Well, what are we supposed to do? We're 100% right, he's 100% wrong. So now he feels pain because of what happened. Why is that my fault? Well, I'll tell you why. Because when it comes to machloket, the best thing we can do in most situations, I would say for the vast majority of situations, is to just step away. Step away. Because if somebody feels pain, then someone has to pay for that pain. And if it comes because of you, forget the right, forget the wrong, you will have to pay for it. You will have to pay for it. I've told you that story. I've told you several times. There's much, much greater people than me who've told this story much better than me. But I'll tell you very briefly. There's a part of a story. There was a person who, I'm going to say it in a very obscure way. He was involved in a court case with somebody else. And he won. And of course, he was right. And the person who was in the Din Torah with him who lost, he lost. Justice was done. Yet, in Shamayim, the person who won the case caused pain to the one who lost the case. This is a true story. And the person who was right had to pay. Now, of course, we're not talking about the winner's the loser, the loser's the winner. Of course, the one who won the case, he had the money went to him. That's fine. But we're talking about on the level of pain, you cause pain to your fellow man. Now you could say, well, he didn't have to come to the Din Torah. Okay, be that as it may. If a person causes pain to somebody else, it goes beyond right or wrong. Don't cause pain to anybody else, no matter how right you are. Hashem should listen to all our tefillahs for the good. And Hashem should wipe out machloket from this world and should give us the wherewithal to cease with machloket. Because you can see, you can take a Korach who should have been the highest and throw him into a place where he got absolutely nothing. Hashem should reward us with everything. We should run away from machloket. We should approach our brothers. We should be happy that we are the losers. We should be happy that Hashem loves us. And we should take that love to the Binyan Ariel and dance around with Mashiach Tzidkenu. It should happen in our time. Amen.